Hello, everybody, and welcome to another in the long overdue Unsolved Mysteries series we've been doing.
Yes, today is the mystery of the photo manipulation. And we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. We got it all laid out here. But basically, for people that aren't familiar, this is specific to a thing that's going on in concept art and illustration right now, where people are kind of endlessly debating the merit of using photos or the term that people throw around as photo bashing to get work done faster. And what we're going to try to do today with this Unsolved Mysteries is number one, explain why it happens, why it's a good thing, why it's a bad thing, look at both sides of the argument, and talk about our own personal experience having to do it for jobs and stuff, just to give some insight.
Yeah, and it isn't really that big of an argument,
No,
but
no, it's
it
people
definitely
who,
is something that I think a lot of people, especially people starting out, have like a lot of kind of mixed ideas about. But like, you have so many conflicting opinions. I've heard it like a few times, but I guess right now it's like,
yeah, for some reason right now it's at this weird tipping point, and everybody there's like a huge amount of just kind of sensitivity and vitriol about it all over the place, which we're going to get into. But the first thing we're going to do is number one, come clean about the fact that we've made jokes about photo bashing before. We've been guilty of hating on it on the internet, Facebook, stuff like that. But what I think a lot of people don't understand is that we've done that out of our experiences having to do it for jobs and stuff. And it's usually not serious. We don't actually hate it. We're
no.
usually just making a joke that gets misunderstood. And first off, if that's offended anyone, we're genuinely sorry for that. That's never the intention. But yeah, we're not trying to be hypocritical here and defend something that we've clearly talked about online before. We just want to get it out there right before we start that, yes, we've made jokes about this. Yes, we have our own opinions about it, but there's a whole lot of other stuff for people to consider that we don't think they necessarily get exposed to.
Yeah, and everything serves a purpose, and we want to go over that and talk about pros and cons, and hopefully not so much for people who have been like working in the industry for a long time, but just people who are maybe starting out who don't know which way they want to
Right.
go with their style and their approach. And just talk about like what could happen, what's helpful, what isn't helpful.
Because more so than with any other topic for beginners, I think this is the one where there's the most divided amount of opinion.
Yeah.
It's like you don't really have that argument anymore where is digital as good as traditional? That's kind of gone by the wayside. People pretty much accept it. A lot of the other old arguments for reference and stuff like that have gone by. Use of 3D, that's kind of gone. This is the current one where if you're a beginner stepping into the industry now, there's a huge division of professionals you might look up to that are either saying this is great, use it, or this is the worst thing ever, don't do it. So we're going to go through a bunch of stuff, pros, cons, all that kind of thing we just mentioned. But the first thing we're going to start with, just in the interest of being honest, because it might resonate with other people, is why did we hate it back when we hated it, and why did we say the things we've said, and where did those feelings come from?
Yeah, for me personally, like I got started doing this when everybody was using conceptart.org, and this was like 8 years ago, or even before that, like when the forums were pretty much the only place where you could find artists,
Mm,
doing like studies and things, and really working hard and actually being like active parts of the industry, and like it was this huge attitude like that just went throughout the whole thing of work super hard, study every single day, do the fundamentals, train like not like you're training like an old master, but in the same vein of like you're doing studies from life, paintings from life, drawings,
right.
you're actually like looking at old master paintings and trying to replicate what they did and their brushstrokes, and studying color theory, and basically like really down to the roots, like what is all this stuff fundamentally. And that's where like a lot of the kind of negative parts of
Mm,
like my personal feelings of it, because i'm so I'm so coming from that place of being like, you should do it this way, you should do it that way. Like when you're coming up, you should really understand exactly, it's like understand the mechanics of it.
Right, because the thing that a lot of newcomers might not understand, because the forums haven't been around for a couple of years now, is that there used to be this sketchbook mentality, and that's not the mentality necessarily anymore. Things have changed quite a bit. But the sketchbook mentality back when the forums were huge used to be that every time somebody did a study or, filled a sketchbook, they'd scan all the pages and put them up, and you could watch their creative development and their fundamentals improve in real time over the course of them getting better. And you actually saw the amount of hard work that went into doing it, and you saw the improvement happening in front of you. And you realize that by them working constantly all the time and uploading that stuff and showing you that you could get better at anything with enough hard work. And all these famous sketchbooks that came out of that, like everyone refers to Hannes's and Smothers, you'd look at that and you go, oh, wow, this is the way to do it. And then even as far back as on the forums, when people would take certain shortcuts to make the work look finished faster, not necessarily photo bashing, but sometimes that was there too. There was an overwhelmingly negative response to it because the model at the time was based on that sketchbook model. People would say, people thought that it cheapened the hard work that other people were putting into their portfolios when they saw people do these things.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the case, but that was the mentality.
Yeah, so coming away from that kind of just way of thinking about how you improve and what your work should be, basically like when you're looking at it saying, ideally this should be the process, and you're looking at it from the aspect of like, I need to learn as much as possible all the time. There should be this constant learning experience. And
Right.
then when you come into a different place and all of that's gone and you feel, I mean, like my personal thing was when I don't really care anymore, but when I did care about it, it was like, you'd see people getting instant gratification for things, and you see stuff just getting put out there that just looked finished, like
Right.
finished as quick as possible. And then, of course, you're like, from my perspective, I'd say like, that's great and all, but you couldn't do that without the computer, and that would, be like, haha, way to
Right.
not learn anything.
There used to be this mentality on conceptart.org specifically. I remember a sentence that got thrown around a lot that I used to be very conscious of was you're only as good as you are when Google image search is taken away from you. Like once that's gone, your abilities, like what you can draw without having the internet to reference stuff, what you can draw without having the internet to pull things from, that was their kind of way of proving where you actually stood without any of the tricks or the shortcuts. So we both came out of that kind of community and that kind of mindset. But that being the case, a lot of things have changed since then. The whole model's changed, the forums are gone. And even though this is kind of a weird thing to grasp, think about it for a minute because it's true. The current model for Hollywood and video games didn't exist back when that was all going on, like, 8 years ago or whenever that was in its heyday, maybe 10 years ago, when that was really huge. None of the Marvel movies had come out. That phenomenon hadn't happened yet. The only huge multi-million dollar thing that had been done was Lord of the Rings, which was entirely done pretty much with traditional art, people using markers. This entertainment industry model that we're all trying to be a part of now and trying to work with did not exist. So
Or at
the
least to a
form
lesser degree.
to a way lesser degree. The status of what concept art is now and the amount of work that goes into it and the quality that's demanded at the speeds that are required did not exist back when CA was in its heyday. So everything has changed because that market is completely shifted, and a lot of people don't think about that. But movies are made faster now. They're more expensive. More artwork and pre-production goes into them. They need
Tons
more
and
people to
tons of
do it.
CG.
Tons of CG. The amount of CG has gone up by like 1,000%. And it's all of super high quality. So they need 3D renders. They need concept art that the 3D render can use and get all the little details so they don't have to waste any time getting it redrawn or zooming in on certain parts. So as we go forward, just keep that in mind. This mentality that a lot of the older people in the community or people that came from the CA model have was born from a time when the current state of concept art didn't even exist. So everything has changed and everything's going to react accordingly.
Yeah, it was back when the only thing you would call somebody who used photos was a matte painter.
Yeah, exactly.
But the whole point of this was to say that, as much as that was our opinion, or, that whole like school of thought, it obviously has shifted since we've been working professionally and having to do jobs in like a day or just a couple hours. You have to get an idea out. So
Yeah.
we've both had to do the photo bashing, photo manipulation, whatever you want to call it, matte
Yeah, I
painting.
mean, even the term photo bashing, because the bashing sounds negative, so I don't really know what to. I guess we're just going to call it photo painting from here out, because even when you have a discussion on like
Yeah.
Facebook or whatever about this, and you call it photo bashing, people are immediately offended because the word is photo bashing and it sounds negative. But photo painting or photo manipulation, we've both had to do it. I had to do it for 6 months on Transformers 4. It was the first time I'd ever had to do that. I had to learn the process because I wasn't used to having to do a turnaround time that was that immediate. Dave had to start doing it on films, right? Was that your first time?
Yeah, I had tried to do it once in a while before then, just because I knew it was like required. Like as you just basically get into it, you learn a lot about who does what on what and what's required of you. So I had tried to do it on my own, but I never got anywhere with it. My first real like intense go with like photo painting was advertising. Having to do movie poster stuff and having to turn it around in 24 hours was really hard. So I learned a ton doing that. But yeah,
Right. And I mean, when I went into the studio, I had never done it before. I was entirely like, I just painted from just using brushes in Photoshop. But I went in and they said, like, at bare minimum, we need to have one, 10,000 pixel high transformer in full resolution, fully rendered and done in 5 days, preferably faster. If you can get it down to 3 days, that's great. 2 days, you're like a superstar. And I was like, this is impossible. Like I've never heard of having to do something like this fast. It was crazy. And I remember coming in, I'd never known how to do any of that, so they taught me how to blend 3D models into the work to get the painting done faster, get it based down. The transformers are made out of obviously vehicles and stuff, so for like if I was painting Optimus, they'd say, well, he turns into this truck. So for his chest, you can go get photos of that truck and cut the pieces out and actually assemble it, and then put a layer over it and blend it all out as a painting, and it'll look pretty good, and that'll save a lot of time. And I'd never done that stuff before. Having to up-res things, having to down-res things, having to blend things out, all the adjustment stuff you can do in Photoshop that I've never had to play with. And even though I went into it with that mentality from the forums that it was cheap or it was a lesser thing or whatever, the bottom line that I came out of it with was it was faster. It got the work out of a higher quality in a shorter amount of time. It was what the client wanted to see, which is hugely important, and it actually ended up teaching me a ton about how to use Photoshop.
yeah, and also like where your values stand when you're on your own, stuff
Right.
like that.
But I mean, that's the thing is that when you have to do that and you have to do it in such a short amount of time, what happens is that the photos, because they're photos, look better than your painting because you're making it up from the top of your head. So this necessity shows up that your painting has to suddenly look a million times better to match the photo because you're not going to downgrade the photo to look like your painting. You're going to bring everything else up to look like the best parts. So you start to be more conscious about your mark making, you start to be more conscious about your lighting, and you just end up learning a ton. If you approach it from that angle, you end up learning a ton.
So anyway, that being said, we have a whole list of pros and cons, basically like jump off points, and then we're just gonna
Yeah.
talk through them. So
The idea here is that, there's valid arguments on both sides of the issue, and we understand both of them, so we're just going to go through it. No one's right or wrong about this. That's the thing. It's just, I just don't think people understand the two sides of it. So, yeah,
yeah,
I mean, with that being said, we're going to start with the pros.
and hopefully we represent the sides well enough. We're gonna
We're trying.
we're gonna try not to be biased on anything,
Yeah.
but we're human beings, and we'll learn.
So, the first most obvious pro to photo painting is speed of delivery.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like we've already said, you never know what's gonna happen. There could be a moment in a job where maybe you've had the luxury to paint. Like right now, I can't say anything, but I'm working on a movie, and most of the concepts I've done for this movie have been fully painted. So I'm painting them from scratch, and that's like a luxury for some of the time. I can really get through it, but occasionally it'll be like we want to see this part of this character today. And I'm like, well, I have to do some other stuff, and like, oh my god, like how am I going to juggle all of this? And usually I'll take that as just a challenge anyway and try and get faster. But a lot of times I'll have to go, all right, so I'm going to have to use a couple photos here, or else this just realistically isn't going to happen today. And I
Right.
can't, above all else, I cannot let the client down.
Hmm.
So, yeah, the time is a huge, huge part of it, especially just to like maintain your whole, uh, basically like your credibility, like that you can
Right.
deliver on this stuff that you deserve to be here, kind of thing.
And yeah, keep in mind, guys, when you're doing pre-production for movie stuff and game stuff too, but movies especially have an accelerated timeline. Um, a lot of the stuff they ask you to do in the very beginning is just to get a visual kind of jumping off point, just to set a mark where, okay, this is kind of what this character is going to be. This is kind of what this environment's going to be. It's close enough that we can move forward. And then if we want a better, more detailed rendering of it, we'll come back to it later and use this artwork to either push it forward or, maybe paint on top of this directly. But if they say like, okay, we're going to be filming this thing, it's in an ice world, and we have to have something for a meeting tomorrow, you're not going to turn out anything of a significant quality in that amount of time, but they don't need that. They just need something that looks good enough that they can get a feeling in the board meeting or whatever it's going to be of, okay, this is an establishing shot. This is the feel it's basically going to be. We'll come back to it later. Like, and that's fine. That's a huge part of it. So with that said, the next thing after speed is that it makes it easier for you to be part of a creative pipeline in terms of teamwork, because this is now expected and industry standard for films.
Yeah.
So if you can do it, that means you can work with other people that do it, and files can get sent around and finished in a faster amount of time again. Or you can hand it off to somebody else if it has to be handed to them, and they're going to know what to do because you're using the same visual language. People can assemble things for you and hand them to you so you can paint over them. It just makes everything more streamlined.
Yeah, and let's just, right to the point of this is a movie, and if it's going to be a real, real live action movie, then they want it to be as realistic as possible.
Right.
They want the representation of the thing that they are putting into the movie right there in front of them. Like they want to be able to look at it, they want to see the textures, they want to like know how the thing feels.
Hmm.
There's a whole lot going into it that you need to get across, and again, you need to be able to do that, in a day. So it's like, what if you can be a part of that whole like, pipeline,
Yeah.
like Dan's saying, then you're valuable. It's like that
Yeah.
you can just give that out, that you can go like, I'm not going to zoom in and do every single little texture on this guy. Like if I'm going to do his pants have this texture, and I'm just going to grab the texture and drop it on there, so I can
Because
say, to convey to them the idea of this is just really loose, and it's to show you what it is.
Yeah, because the thing is that a lot of people don't consider, they'll look at the work that comes out of a movie that someone probably had to do in a day, and they'll go like, wow, that's shitty. Look at all that cut up mountain stuff. What's going on? This is trash. You'll get those vitriol kind of things. People are going to be super negative. But what they don't understand is that work, they don't want to leave anything up to the imagination when they're doing those establishing shots, because so much money goes into movies now. Like an astronomical amount of money goes into making these movies, millions and millions and millions of dollars. They don't want to leave anything up to the imagination. They want to know exactly what it's going to look like before the camera turns on, because every second they have to revise something or go back to the drawing board, they're bleeding thousands of dollars. So all of the concept art has to look as photoreal as possible. All the establishing shots have to look good. If you're doing something like Transformers, like I worked on, they need those establishing shots of the characters to look as mechanical and detailed as the movie is going to. Because in the rare event that they actually get to filming or they get to 3D rendering it, if anything looks off that could have been prevented, they are literally in the red instantly, and they can't afford to do that. So obviously they're going to resort to these kinds of artistic things in the beginning to minimize those things later.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you're helping the team.
Yep. So we already talked about the rendering. It makes it a necessity that your rendering comes up to match the photos, so it kind of ends up making you a better person in the end. That's a big pro. Um, and another big thing that a lot of people don't consider is that knowing how to do this and being able to do it well opens you up to a huge market of jobs that you would not get otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just in the advertising side that I was doing, I that job, like yeah, I can't be painting something next to an actor and in 24 hours, and maybe some people can do this, but me personally, in 24 hours, I'm not going to make a believable monster sitting right next to a character that's a human being
Mm,
and have it read right without using some, at least like textures from a real creature like a rhino or something like that. It's like things need to be built up to look and match the feel of the whole ad.
hmm.
Nothing can be weird. There's a lot of bad advertisements out there where stuff doesn't really work. But ideally, you need that kind of skill set in order to, deliver that kind of realistic look. And
Right.
if there are really like specific jobs out there that you wouldn't get if you didn't know how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like, as usual, there's a second step to the criticism that nobody ever takes that I think everybody should try to take, where, we've talked before about being cynical and being negative can actually be an advantage if you take the second step of being the one to fix those things. Because, a popular thing last year and going into this year is people will post up, these movie posters that are just a bunch of principal photography that are kind of meshed together, and they make this really awkward, tangent-filled poster that comes out. Like, the Hobbit posters that just use the photos, those had tons of it. All of the Marvel posters that are photo montages have had these problems. And people put them up and they go, look how bad this is. Look how bad this photo manipulation is. This is terrible. And they shit all over it and ha ha ha, and it's hilarious. And sure it is. But the second step to that, the second part of that criticism should be, wait a minute. If I can blend photos better than these people, then they will hire me instead of these people. So why aren't they? And the answer is you have nothing in your portfolio that's telling them that you know how to do that better than the people they're hiring to do it.
Hmm.
And that is a huge market. Huge
And
market.
the other side of that, and I know we'll get into it as a con, but to be able to paint fundamentally and not
Hmm.
coming from a photo background, especially if you're a concept artist who's trained with like you've studied old masters, you can paint realistically. It might take you a little bit of time, but you can create something that looks photoreal. It's
Right.
like if that is your skill set, then adding the manipulation side of it, just to up your basic like income in jobs, like you have a leg up on all of the graphic designers who are part-time photo manipulators.
Right.
All
Because
of a sudden,
they don't know how to paint.
yeah, all of a sudden you can set characters in the world of the photo. You can set them in the same lighting scenario and make it
Right.
make sense, and it works. And you'll walk away being like the guy who can create stuff from nowhere, from your imagination, and they're like, wow, that's it doesn't look awkward. It looks like it makes sense. Like that's such a huge advantage to have over people who strictly do photo manipulation.
Right. And the reason that a lot of these posters look bad that a lot of people don't consider is because they're hiring people that know how to use Photoshop to make them, but they're not hiring people that know how to paint. And the reason they're not hiring people that know how to paint is because their portfolios don't have any work in them that show they know how to use Photoshop to manipulate photos.
Yeah.
They go to graphic designers by default because they understand Photoshop as a default. What they don't understand as graphic designers is narrative image making as a whole in terms of illustration. But the thing is, more illustrators could get those jobs and better posters would come out as a result. The problem is that no one's portfolio has anything like that in it, so they're not going to take a risk hiring you.
Yeah, and on the risk of going down a tangent, uh, you might think it's obvious that you could be able to, that you could do that stuff because you know how to paint and use Photoshop, but it's not obvious to them. In the same
Hmm.
way that if you go to Marvel, like I've used this example before, and you have a Superman portfolio, they'll say, yeah, but how do you draw Spider-Man?
Hmm.
And even though they can see Superman flying around, they still want to see you drawing Spider-Man or Daredevil or something like
Right.
that.
Another artist can look at your portfolio and see the skills you have and understand how it's going to translate into different ideas, but the people hiring you to do these jobs aren't artists. That's the
Yeah.
thing you got to remember. They don't know what you're capable of unless you literally show them exactly that.
And they're not going to take the risk unless they know.
No, because there's too much money riding on it. So keep that in mind. That's probably the biggest pro out of all of them is that, if you're one of the people that complains that there's not enough work or that the work doesn't pay enough or all those things, and then you simultaneously shit on people that photo paint, that's the thing. You could triple your market. You could make so much more money and you could, get your name out there in an unbelievable way if you just combined those two things. It's the two things no one ever seems to mix is the fundamental knowledge of painting and the ability to manipulate photos. If you can marry those two things together, you are the guy that they're going to want.
Yeah, and you might think of it as like compromising, but it's really not because it's like you can stick to your guns and you can still do what you do, but you're going to learn a lot from doing the photo stuff. I wouldn't say, we're going to go into why that shouldn't be literally the only thing you do if you want to be like an illustrator creating worlds from your imagination, but it is a huge way to take on like a new challenge and learn a lot and really improve your skills.
Right. So, that being said, we're going to get into the cons, but right up front, we want to say that these are cons in context. There's no 100% definitive bad thing about anything. It's all in context. So when we say these things as cons, we're not saying that this is illegitimate or that it's bad. We're saying that it has the potential to be bad if you let these specific things get out of hand.
Yeah, and again, this is just us.
Yep,
We're just a couple guys talking about this. And
exactly.
if you don't like agree exactly what we're saying, it's super okay.
Yeah, we are trying very hard to give both sides of the argument a fair light, though, so we apologize if we're offending anybody.
Yeah.
But the first thing, the most obvious thing, is for beginners, a sense of false positivity. And what that means is that, you're taking a bunch of things that are already looking realistic because they're photographs. You're blending them together, you're adding a few effects here and there, maybe some painting, and it looks very finished very quickly. But what you're not adding into the mix is that you're a beginner and you don't understand the different qualities of different kinds of finishes. It might actually look very bad to everybody else, but because you're a beginner, it looks totally done way too fast, and you're selling yourself short of all of those mistakes you could potentially be making, all of the learning that could be going on, all the fundamentals you could be building up by jumping right into using photos.
Yeah, the main thing with it is that it is, it's born out of necessity. To use these techniques is generally, it's like a marketable thing. Like you want to be able to do it because it's a skill set that is needed. But is it something that should define your style? And that's something that you have to consider. But, in and of itself, it is a tool. To be able to do that, it is another tool. It's to be able to deliver in a really short amount of time and have something look good, real, like we talked about. But the problem with that in the beginning is that you want something out there that's finished, but it doesn't come from that need. It's not the need of the client, that is also informed by what you already understand, having learned what you learned and studied, and are applying, with the photo manipulation to basically like give you that leg up to deliver what you could do on your own, but don't have the time to do.
Right.
So it's like, in that way, it can negatively impact your growth in the beginning. Like, you want to know how to do it without the photo. Like, if a computer weren't around, if suddenly everything went away, you could pick up, a pencil and paper and do a concept without having to put photos together to find something. So, yeah, it can really like end up hurting your development in the early stages when you're getting this constant like feedback of, oh, I finished it, finished, and then when you go back to having to do the slow stuff, it is really boring. I know I've been through it. I've studied, and you're sitting there and you're studying all the time, and how you wish you could just have a finished portfolio that looked like the people you look up to.
And then, another part of that is that if you're a beginner and you're making your portfolio entirely out of images that come from this process, there is a potential to really hurt yourself and put yourself in a corner in terms of client relationship, because I know this happened to some people I went to school with, so I'm just going to reiterate it. I've talked about this before, but they would take photos, they would get photos off of Google, they would collage them and they would blend them and they would, call it a finished piece. And they'd put it out there and then they'd get a job, a freelance job or, something with a client, potentially a company, where they would say, okay, do some art for us in this style. And then they'd do it and everything would be fine. And then they'd get a call at like 8 p.m. one night and it would be the art director they're working with. And they'd say, look, everything's good on that piece you handed into us, but we have to change the arm for this reason. Instead, we need it to be going at this angle, holding this thing, and you have to change that, and we need it for tomorrow morning. And suddenly, you're in this corner where if you can't find the perfect photo to do that, you don't have time to call the model you used. You don't have time to shoot the thing you shot. You don't have time to set the light up. If you can't find a perfect thing on Google that matches exactly what they're looking for, that job's not going to get done or it's going to look unbelievably bad, and that's going to be entirely on you because you don't have those necessary developed fundamental skills to do that from scratch. And that's a bad position to put yourself in if you start taking on work because you're the person responsible for getting it in on time.
Yeah. I mean, it's really popular right now to have a portfolio that consists of a lot of those things.
Right.
But, and I don't mean to say that it's an easy way out, but it is a skill, like I said, that comes from necessity. So, like, the problem is that, like, you end up having that instant reaction. You get something out and you get that positive reinforcement of it's done, it's done, it's done. But then you're discounting a lot of the things that come from growing in a way that's like a more traditional route. Like if you think about a painter knows that there's 5 more steps ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows it's going to take a pretty good amount of time. He's going to have to wait for paint to dry. He's going to have to wait for all of these things. So what he'd make sure of in the beginning was that the composition was right. He'd make sure that the design was solid. He'd make sure that the drawing was correct. And all of this, in the colors, the color theory, everything's in place. Like you kind of have an idea where you're going. You set up a roadmap for the design. And basically, in that way, you're going to try to nail it because it's an investment. You're making an investment. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure it's worth it. And when you can do something in a short amount of time, you're going to take a hit on all of that planning because
Right.
you know that you can just make another one or you can just do this, over and over and over. And it's a little easier, you get instant gratification. But a lot of the thought ends up like really being lost. You're not going into it with like these great plans of what this could be when it's finished. You're playing, you're having fun with it, and all
Right.
of that's great. But you want to also have that other side of it where you have those slow periods where you really have to think. So
Just to
it's just harder.
sum that up, basically just when the work is harder to do, when the work is harder to get out there, you spend a lot more time in the beginning planning to make sure it's going to be as good as possible and that you get it right the first time because you don't have the ability to do it a second time. You don't have the time, you're going to take a hit if you do it a second time. So you spend a lot of time planning, a lot of time being creative. You get all the ideas out, you get the best version of it. You do multiple, composition sketches, color sketches, all that stuff, and then you nail it. When you get rid of that hardship, it just kind of becomes this casual thing where, okay, I did this thing in a couple hours, and if you don't like it, I'll do another thing in a couple of hours. And you're losing all of that awesome potential to kind of plan and kind of be scared that you're going to get it wrong and learn from that. And that is very valuable. Some people might disagree with that, but you learn a lot from that. It's a good thing to at least try.
Yeah, and I mean, just from my own personal experience, that's infinitely valuable to me. Is that you don't always stay slow. You end up getting to the pace of somebody who does photo manipulations. So,
Right.
like when I deliver a concept in a couple days, I got to the point through the studies, and I'm by no means the fastest person out there. But by doing all the studies all the time, and then also taking on the photo stuff, I learned a lot from everything. And now when I do paintings that are just from my imagination for like a movie or a video game or something like that, I can do my fully fledged idea from my head that's, has more of me in it because it's just it's the exact idea I had right there in front of me without any compromise whatsoever.
Right.
And that has been a huge benefit to me over people who would have to rely on a photo, and people would say like, you turn that painting out so fast, that's awesome. And I'd be like, yeah, like I because I come from that place of like concept art and everything, it was always valuable to me to get faster. And where something used to take me like 28 hours or 30 hours to finish, it would come down to 10 and then 8 and then 5 and then 3.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a little bit longer, but you do get to the same kind of place if you work at it.
So
Same
the
kind
next,
of gratification.
yeah, the next kind of potential con that we're going to talk about is basically, you know, it does. We mentioned it briefly earlier that it has the potential to make the rest of the painting that isn't photo based look bad because your painting skills aren't at the level of the photos you're finding. And it becomes jarring and it becomes very obvious that the photos are photos and the stuff that's done by hand is done by hand. And it doesn't become this cohesive whole painting, it becomes this fragmented thing. But we already kind of talked about that, but that leads to something that you want to watch out for if you're doing this. Again, if you're doing this, fine. We're just mentioning these things that you might want to look out for so you don't end up creating these bad habits that are going to ultimately hurt you. If you're using photos and there's some things you can't find, so you paint them in and they don't look as good as the photos, and especially if you're on a job, they want everything to fit. What's naturally going to happen is you don't have the time to suddenly get better as an artist on that short deadline. So you're going to go find more photos to plug in as many holes in the composition as you possibly can, get rid of as much of the hand painted stuff as you can so everything looks as good as it possibly can. What this leads to is that you're not actually painting anything and you're worried so much about getting the work out and assembling it all to look a certain way that you're literally deleting yourself from the equation. You're kind of just turning yourself into a Google hunter, and you're not actually improving as an artist anymore. You're finding all the correct stuff to put together and make this collage that fits, but you're not actually improving in terms of what you can paint, the fundamentals you know. You might learn some blending and stuff, but that's about it in that scenario. So watch out for that, because I've seen people do that where they take a job and they don't have time to learn the fundamentals on that turnaround. So what they do is they just supplement that with, well, I better go learn a 3D program so I can drop this into the environment because I can't draw it, or I better go get Poser because I can't do that leg and it's due tomorrow and I got to get a leg in there that works. And that's kind of stressful, and it's not necessarily the best position to put yourself in.
Yeah, and you want to draw a line between like, what am I doing to make money and what am I doing to improve? This is still the thing that you love to do, and maybe you had a direction you were going in before this, and maybe you had to compromise, or maybe this is the thing that you love to do, is matte painting. But if it is something that is a compromise, then it has to be some distinction between what's the job and where am I growing. And you need to make time for the growth, or else, like in any other job, if all you're doing is the same amount of work at the same level over and over and over, and you're in that wheel, you're never going to get out of it. There's never going to come a point where, maybe you will get lucky, but you can make luck happen by studying and studying and studying outside of it, and basically like kind of weeding out your shortcuts with your skills so that you can match that. And not only will you become more identifiable as the artist who did it, but your skills will just be like so much better, and you'll be that much faster. And it might seem like the speed is worth it in the beginning to be able to do all that, but the investment of time into the fundamentals, even though it's a long road, will in the end make you faster than anybody, especially if you can do the photo manipulations, where that is the positive, coming from that place and also having that skill set on top of it.
Yep. So the next thing, we mentioned earlier in the pros that if you're very good at photo painting and you have a good amount of painting skill already and you can blend those photos and create things on your own to unify the lighting and all that stuff, that you open yourself up to a ton of new jobs. The flip side of that is that if you're a beginner and you jump into photo painting right away and that's all you have in your portfolio, you're actually limiting yourself from tons of jobs. You're losing the ability to work on lots of stuff because without that painting skill there, yes, there are lots of jobs for people that use photos and know how to photo paint, but that's typically only if they're very good at doing that and they know how to blend those things correctly. You're not going to get hired by any of the startup companies that most people work for if that's all that's in your portfolio and it's done poorly. That's the thing that, there's all kinds of jobs for people of all different kinds of painting levels in terms of skill. If you're just a beginner and you're kind of mediocre, there's companies that will hire you. If you're very good at it, there's companies that will hire you, and there's a sliding scale in between. With photo painting, if you're very bad at it in the beginning, no one's going to hire you to do anything. If you're very good at it, people will hire you to do stuff with it, and a couple companies might hire you if you're sort of to the high end of mediocre. But that's the thing, is that in the beginning, you're cutting yourself short of a lot of opportunities to work for a lot of different people if that's all that you have.
Yeah, I mean, there's, like Dan was saying, there's a sliding scale, but I like to talk about just how a concept is a concept. You
Hmm.
know, if we're talking strictly about concept art and film and game, just entertainment in general, and you're creating something for like a, something that needs to be real, whatever, everything rests on the idea. The idea is the whole point of it. That's why you're doing it. That's why you're creating this thing, to get your idea out. So it's like you should be able to bring those ideas to life first, from your imagination, from your hand to the paper, as best you can.
Hmm.
And the limits that come with the photos is just something that ends up hurting the concept. Where I actually see like a lot of benefit in, like Dan was saying, the certain jobs like advertising and stuff. It doesn't matter that much. The stuff is there for you already. And if you can make it real, then you can do that job. But when it comes to like creating something that's cool, then you're going to need to be able to like have your personal idea out there right there
Right.
without having to like cheapen it with any other thing. And like we were saying, it should always be like a tool that you use with it to further like drive home the idea, the point of what you
Hmm.
were doing, to show it, to basically be like, this is exactly what I was thinking, and then this is like what it would look like if it were standing in front of you.
Yeah, and I'd say in terms of that, one thing that I think everybody who wants to photo paint or get into photo painting should do that I don't see a lot of, this might be just a thing where we don't see it, but regardless of the fact that it does seem that people kind of find the photos first and assemble the image
Mm.
secondary. They might know, like, okay, this is going to be a magician. There's going to be some lightning involved. I know that. And then they go and they look for stuff that they can use to kind of build that. But I think the best thing you can do if you are going to go at this is to do as much planning before you go find the photos as possible. Come up with your own composition, draw a figure in that composition that's your own drawing. Don't look at anything on the internet before you have the idea totally down, your image of what it's going to be, what you think is cool, the pose that you think is going to work, the colors you think are going to be the best for it. And then, build it from there. Don't be at the mercy of just opening up Google and being like, well, I guess I could use that. That looks cool. Let's go over to Pose Maniacs and grab something. Then I'll cut up some bodies from this stock website and fit it onto that. Like, be an artist first, be creative first, and then supplement it with all that stuff later. Because, you open yourself up to composition problems, tangent problems, things looking very messy if you don't do that. And, at least that way you get some creativity in there right at the beginning and you don't have to sweat so much of, oh, I didn't anticipate this problem. What am I going to do to fix it on such a short amount of time? Because you've addressed all that stuff in the planning stages.
Yeah, it's the same thing we used to talk about with reference, just painting from reference. Is that, a lot of times when we would look at paintings, they'd be really stiff, and it'd be because people didn't do the idea first. They didn't do the composition first with like the motions of the characters and
Right.
ideally what they wanted. So they'd have like this ideal. I mean, if you were to go and you know, in my opinion, do it like the right way, you'd get your vision out first, as close as you can get. You know, you want to work as hard as you can until you hit the brick wall. When you hit that wall and you can't go any further based on your skills, then grab a reference and then maybe like for the job do the photo thing.
Right.
But hit the wall first, you know, like go as hard as you can, learning as much as you can to be the, you know, to the best of your abilities, and then find where your limitations are, because when you find your limitations in those moments, that's when you know what's next.
Right.
That's when you know what you have to study, what you're suffering at, and then you go back to the fundamentals in that case because you've identified it. And in the moment, you won't have the time to go back and do the fundamentals, so you're going to need supplemental material to make this thing happen.
Hmm. And then, so the next thing, this is kind of a big one, and this is one that a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to, unfortunately, is that you're potentially opening yourself up to all kinds of copyright problems if you're not getting the photos from a stock website that's royalty free.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using actors, if you're using models of any kind. If you see a fashion model wearing a cool thing and you want to use his likeness, a big fashion company owns that photo, and trust me, they have lawyers ready to ruin you. And
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
just,
thing.
even if it doesn't happen, it's a risk that
It's a
exists.
huge risk. And the reason it's such a big risk, you might say, "Oh, they're never going to come after me. I'm just an artist making work, whatever." The second you start working for clients, if that's part of your process and you use copyrighted material in your client work, you are opening them up to litigation, not just yourself. And if you do that to a client that has any kind of clout or profile, you're basically going to get blacklisted because no one wants to take a risk on an artist that's going to open them up to getting sued. So that's the thing, is that you really have to be getting your photos, either taking them yourself or getting them from stock websites where everything is royalty free, copyright, it's open, it's out there, it's public domain. If you haven't checked all the boxes on every single photo you've used to make sure that that is the case, there is a potential that you are opening yourself and your client up to a whole lot of problems once that image is published.
And just, coming at that from a different perspective, we're all, well, potentially, if you're listening to this, we're all artists, and you wouldn't want somebody to take your painting and paint on top of it and say it
Right.
was theirs. So you shouldn't do that either.
Hmm.
This person did do the thing. They took the photo, they planned whatever, they set up lighting, and, so in that way, it's basically like it can be just theft.
Yeah. And typically, I mean, not always. There's exceptions, of course, but the best photo, paintings, the best manipulations of the photographs into the painted final are usually when somebody takes the effort to set up a model, set up their own lights, get as much stuff exactly to their thumbnail that they planned out as possible. And once that's all done and they've done as much as they can on their own, only then do they go to the search engines to fill in the rest. There's a huge difference when you can tell that it was planned and their own thing, and when it's just, oh, I went on, that stock website that everybody uses, and I got the guy with the axe, and I, moved some limbs around and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, the copyright thing, it's a pretty big problem once you start getting paying work, and you don't want to open yourself up to that because everybody talks to everybody. It's very easy to become the guy that screwed that company over, and then you have to kind of get that mark off of yourself, and it's not a fun time.
Man.
But the last thing we're going to talk about in terms of cons that are in context is condescension, being opened up to it, and kind of having to live with that. And you want to explain this, Dave?
Well, I think that, like, I mean, that's the con from like the other side of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that, and this isn't to say that, this is basically not saying that photo manipulators are wrong, but the con with having like this back and forth is that it's so condescending to just be like, where what artists should be. And it's like, yeah, but but maybe you've never been in the place that other person's been in,
Hmm.
where you had to like deliver what you had to deliver. And making compromises like that, I mean, for me personally, that's so hard to do because I'm like, all I want to do is get better at painting. And it's like, and I see my faults all the time and everything I'm doing. And then being like, and now I'm going to use a photo and I'm going to hurt myself because I'm not learning from this. And I really do want to learn from what I'm doing. So it's like, when I had to do that, at first I had that, like, I was like condescending, like I was condescending to myself, where I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing this. Like, this isn't even like anything. And
Yeah.
then I started to actually learn from it. And I was like, oh, there's a lot here that I wasn't letting myself even look at because I was so busy hating myself for not being a pure artist, whatever that means.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the worst part of like that whole debate on, it was the same thing with the traditional versus digital. You'd have the traditional people being condescending and then the digital people being like, well, it's just the same thing.
Right.
Like it might be easier because you don't have all the wait time, you don't have like to have the perfect lighting setup, you don't have to have, all the tools around all the time and whatever. But
Hmm.
it's similar, we're all creating ideas, we're all working on illustrations that illustrate moments and things. It's not like any one thing is better than the other. And the same thing goes for this. Is it's there, in context, it's awesome. In some ways, it can be hurtful to somebody who starts out and they use it as a crutch.
Right.
Anything that's used as a crutch though is the same thing. If you want to be somebody that creates things from their imagination all the time and the only thing you've ever done is use reference without studying how light and form interact and whatever else, then that's just as much a crutch.
Hmm. And
And yeah.
there's two things to keep in mind. No matter how you make your painting, no matter how you assemble it, no matter what techniques you use, every image that anyone makes with any technique ultimately boils down to two things. It's being creative in the beginning and then creating the thing. Your thumbnailing, your sketching, your idea generation, that's part number one. That's the you. That's where, your ideas are going to come through. That's where your signature stuff is going to be applied. That's the part that no one can do but yourself. And then number two is creating the thing. And how you choose to do that, whether it's oils, acrylics, digital, photos, custom brushes, collage, whatever it's going to be, at least that first part, you have to have that first part. It's the most important thing. That's where your planning, your ideas, all your stuff comes through. So be creative first, then create. Don't just make things on a whim without any planning. Like people hire you to be creative. That's what they want. They're hiring you to be a person that has ideas. Yes, there are jobs that just want you to assemble things, but they're not many, and they're usually pretty far along in your career once you've established that you can be creative. That's kind of the weird thing, especially when you're working for big studios, is that you spend all this time proving that you can have ideas and be creative in the beginning, and then the big people pay you to take that freedom away. And they go, okay, do this thing we already planned out, make it look as good as possible. We don't, whatever, just do it. So it's kind of weird. So take advantage of it now while you have it. Yes, there's exceptions to that, and I'm kind of joking, but it's also sort of true. And, do as much of that first step as you can for as long as you can, because it's ultimately going to be what people talk about.
Yeah. And to the side of the condescending, like more traditional, fundamental people that come up, it's, I mean, like, and I know that it comes from a place, just for me personally, like when I was feeling like that, where like you see somebody in a place of like credibility doing
Right.
something that you feel isn't credible, and you want to take it away from them any way you can because you're mad. You're like, how do you get to that point without understanding the things that you feel like you should understand?
Right.
Like how do you even do that? And it kind of is frustrating. But think about it in terms of like, like have you ever had just a regular job that you go to and there's one person there who does an amazing job every day, and they're overachiever, they're like nice, and then they complain about everybody else at that job, and it's like, but everybody else who's at that job, they're like, it's just a job. Like, this
Hmm.
is just what I do to make an income for my family. And it's
Hmm.
like you're all of a sudden that person who's there creating a new standard for what that job is suddenly making everybody else live up to that standard in their own head.
Yep.
And it's like that isn't fair to everybody else in their circumstances.
Right.
So you never really know where any of these people are coming from, or what their day to day is, or what they do outside of Facebook, outside of this immediate industry. And to hold everybody to your standard of really hard work, of putting everything into this, is taking away that sometimes people go home and they have other things that are happening to them. And I don't
Right.
know, it's strange how we turn it into you know just a lifestyle instead of it being a part of your life,
Right. Right.
where
Right. I live
it's
art 24/7. I'm
yeah,
not
it's
a
like you
human made
live
of
in
multiple things.
yeah, like you live and breathe it, and you can't just have that job that you have.
Yeah, and then when you live and breathe it, it's all you have. So when something like this controversy shows up, you care about it more because you don't have anything else to care about. And
Yeah,
everything magnifies and it gets out of control. But
and I
we've
totally
all,
understand that.
yeah, we've all had it. I'm guilty of it. Dave's guilty of it. We get it. But that's the thing, like we did spend a lot more time on cons than pros, but I just want to explain real quick before we move on. That's because the pros are self-explanatory. It's just this is a good thing that can happen. We wanted to spend more time on the cons, not because there are more cons, but because we wanted to explain them, find the possible good in them, and put them in context so people understand it's not good versus bad. It's this can happen or this can happen, and here's how to get around, the negative one because it's not just bad. It's, it could be if you let certain things get out of control.
Yeah, and with that, my door is being knocked on, and I'm in my underwear right now. So
Oh no. Who do
hold
you
on a
think it could
second.
be? Sure.
I'm gonna mute my mic. Talk to the people there.
Sure, yeah. So, Dave's door is being knocked on. He's in his underwear. He has to put on clothes and then answer his door in that order. I don't want to talk about the rest of the bullet points we have necessarily because I know Dave's going to want to weigh in on them. So basically, what I'm going to get into, and then Dave can weigh in on it when he comes back. A big part of why we're doing this now is because this comment was going around on Facebook and some other stuff earlier this week. People have started calling, when they do a photo painting that incorporates photos they found on the internet into it, when they put out the final painting that has the photos in it, they're calling the photos in the painting reference. And that offended some people. Obviously, my friend James Zapata weighed in on it with a joke on Facebook. People got offended. It's not reference. It's in the final painting, and it's a photo that you used off the internet. That's not what reference means. So yes, people got offended by that. Yes, people didn't understand why people were getting so angry about it. Whole lot of misunderstanding, but that's the wrong word to apply to it. That's where all that anger kind of came from. And I think it's important for people that are starting out to understand that, words mean things. They mean specific things, and that is not reference. That's the thing.
Hey.
Hey, I'm talking about how if you use a photo in the final image, it's not reference. You
Yeah.
can, like, some people have started calling it that, but I just wanted to explain very quickly why that isn't the case.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not reference if it's sitting in the photo. I mean, in the painting.
Yeah, if you take a photo and it's in the final painting, it's not reference. That's the thing because you haven't referenced it, you've used it.
Yeah, I
You,
actually hadn't heard anything about this until you mentioned it.
yeah, yeah, it's some people started using that term, some other people made a joke about it and then everybody got really mad. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's the thing. Do you have to go? Who was at your door?
Mm. It was a mistake. The guy came to the wrong door. But uh no, like I'd like to think that that's just using the wrong word without really like understanding it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I don't
No.
think that people really like if
No.
it's like if you knew what like reference meant, I don't think you'd say that.
No, yeah, that's the thing. I just think it's a misunderstanding, but just so
Yeah.
people get it, we're going to move past this, but if you take something and put it in your piece and it's in the final piece, it's not reference. Reference is something you use secondary to the final piece to enhance certain elements of it through your own painting ability. It's something you look at to improve what you're doing that you wouldn't know how to do otherwise. It's not something that you actually put in the final because you haven't referenced it, you've just taken it, you know. So the word doesn't work. But anyway,
Yeah. I'm
moving on.
uh I'm just gonna walk away from the topic for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the same on topic, but I was just thinking about like how much I miss those communities. Like when there was like one route that was happening,
Hmm.
or at least like a route that you could take. It was so clear on how to get better.
Yeah.
And I wonder what happens now with people who are like just entering Facebook from the like who have found concept art through Facebook,
Right.
or have interested in it through like a I wrote like a big blog post about a bunch of this stuff, but about like personalities and things, and I don't believe in anybody is popular. Nobody's a celebrity in the world that we all kind of like live in.
No.
Like, ask anybody on the street who any of these people are, and they'll have no idea.
Yeah, no
Ask
one's gonna
them,
know.
ask them who J.J. Abrams is. They won't know either.
Mm.
But yeah, I was just like thinking about how people find it now, because there used to be the thing where you'd search for it and you'd find conceptart.org if you even knew what concept art was,
Hmm.
and then that would be your kind of like access point to it. And there was just so many amazing people sitting there, and amazing people who were like right out in the open about everything that they did.
Right.
And you would get to just like look through it all and like experience their whole journey to where they are now. And it
Hmm.
was so inspiring that that's like one of the reasons I started working so hard, and I know that's one of the reasons you did too,
Hmm.
and a lot of people I know. It's like why I started the Crimson Daggers and everything. And it's just, it blows my mind that like that kind of tool isn't there anymore, that kind of resource. Or maybe it is to a lesser extent, or maybe there's a different place that I'm not really like thinking of.
Right.
But I can't seem to find that anymore online, where people have like this big pool of just amazing professionals who are working in that industry and are
No, it's
also
all it's all scattered.
humble to the point of like working in front of people and failing in front of people. And
Yeah.
it's it's too bad. And I really, if you can, I'm saying this now because if you can find a way to do that, or bring something together, because there isn't even a CG hub anymore,
Yeah.
then you would change everything. Like I
Even
wish we had the
the
time
even the
to do
forums that are out
anything.
there right now, the new ones like ArtStation and stuff like that, they're almost modeled off of social media where it's like, here's the final image, like it and comment.
Right.
It's not like here's a sketchbook where you get to watch all of my failures and, every part of the process is documented here.
And everybody's leaving critiques and stuff.
Right, right. It is too bad that that's gone. But I mean, everything's controversial now. Even saying that that's gone is probably controversial. I'm going to get hate mail that says CA is still the greatest thing in the world after I get off of this. Whatever. Everyone's mad about everything. But the next topic we had listed, which is a good topic because it's increasingly a problem. We're done with the pros and cons. We're just on points of discussion now about this issue.
Sure.
Sameness is a huge issue. And what sameness is that because there's a limited pool of reference on the internet, even though Google image search is billions of images strong, the ones that everyone are looking at typically come from a handful of Tumblrs that everyone is following. They come from, if you're going to
Hey,
paint a robot mech, what?
I'm looking at you, not just armor.
Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly. Or just a night, or whatever that is, and a couple
Yeah.
other ones. Everyone's looking at the same shit, and even if they're not looking at the same shit, they're searching for the same shit. Because if you're like, I'm gonna make a bipedal mech, you go to Google and you type in bipedal mech, and you're seeing all the same images that everyone else who's ever searched for that is seeing, and it's influencing you. And what that does is, especially if you're photo painting and you're pulling from these sources, you start seeing the same photos across multiple pieces.
Mm.
And instantly that ruins things for everybody. Like that just like that makes the industry worse as a whole. The whole ceiling comes down when that starts to happen because it's like, whoa, I'm not just seeing the strings anymore. I'm seeing everybody using the same strings. Like that's a weird new thing that's starting to happen.
Yeah, I was actually talking to the art director on the movie I'm working on, and like we were talking about this same topic about how like there's a weird kind of sameness going on where everybody's doing like military. Like there's here's just one of them. It's militarized guys with robot heads,
Yep.
and we were talking about it because it's like it's there's so much of it in portfolios, and just if we're talking in art terms, contrast is the thing that makes you stand out. So if you're putting things like that in your portfolio that everybody has in their portfolio, it doesn't mean that everybody has that thing in their portfolio because it's what gets the job. It's
Right.
because they've seen it in everybody else's portfolio and they want to try it too because maybe it's fun and
Or they
sure.
assume or they assume it's in these people's portfolios for a reason, so I better have it so they don't have a leg up.
Right. But really, what makes you stand out is something totally different, usually the complete opposite of that. But anyway, my point being is that I went on to DeviantArt, and DeviantArt has this thing where if you're looking at an image, on the right side, it'll say visually similar images.
Yeah.
And if you look at one of those pictures, there'll be hundreds. It's an endless well. You can click through all of them, and it'll go through the whole thing.
Hmm.
But it's like, and it's not just that it's okay, like if somebody, let's say you said, "Hey, Jim Davis, creator of Garfield, draw me a militarized guy with a mech head," he'd probably have the only original one.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
but
which is funny.
what I'm saying is that it's not because people. I don't think it's because people are like painting them. It's because it's using like ZBrush
Hmm.
mixed with like what ZBrush does in setting up lighting scenarios, and it ends up looking like ZBrush
And
mixed with
it's
the
like,
photo, mixed with like that lens blur thing,
yeah, it's like
and
how many District 9 crab insect prawn aliens have I seen in
yeah,
the past 4 years that are rendered the exact same way, painted over a ZBrush model, where it just says like alien concept. And that's the thing is I don't remember any specific one. I don't remember any of the artists that did them, but I know that there's thousands of them that look exactly the same. And that's the thing is
mm.
they all blend in, and it's the same when art directors look at it.
But what I meant by the Jim Davis comment was that it's not that it's the idea that is unoriginal. It's
Hmm.
the approach to executing the idea. It's almost like there's this once there's a blueprint out there, for instance in the photo manipulation side, there's like a thing that happens that there's trends all the time, so whatever, it's going to go away and there's going to be a new one, and people are always going to follow the same kind of trends, and that's totally normal and acceptable.
Hmm.
I'm not going to say you can't do this. Of course you can. You'll learn from it, I'm sure. But what ends up happening is that because there's not as much of a personal impact on the image when it goes like photo plus ZBrush sculpt plus like some After Effects, it becomes very like streamlined in the process as opposed to like you putting your personal touches on it through painting and things.
Yeah, and then there's very little room for discovery because you've broken it down into these four steps that facilitate everything.
Yeah, I mean that's all I meant by that. Was that the sameness in that way? It's just in the process and executing the images, and then the identity of the person. It's almost like you can't see the difference between each, you know, if you want to say like individual voice, you can't see who painted this, who
Hmm.
created this thing. It ends up looking like it more serves a purpose for like the film industry than it does for you personally.
Yeah. And keep in mind when we're talking about sameness, there's a context to everything, obviously. So
Mm-hmm.
if you get hired to do, I want 14th century English knights, they're going to be fighting or whatever, and it's very, they want it to look accurate, they want it to look real. That armor is only going to be one of a couple sets of armor that's going to be out there that exists, and you're limited by the resource of the time because it's rooted in history. But if you're not doing something that's historical and you're still going to those same sources and you're using the same, 10 sets of armor that everyone is using, you don't have to do that. You can make up your own. You can look at weirder stuff. You can look at other cultures and pull from that. You
Hmm.
can mesh cultures. You
I
can
mean, you
just
could just
make up
look
your
at the
own.
mechanics of how armor
Yeah.
works.
And then just make up your own set. You can do all kinds of things. But, you know, that really is a thing now, unfortunately, where you're seeing the same models, the same sets of armor, the same backgrounds to some degree that are from these stock websites or these tumblers everyone's following showing up in multiple pieces, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, like
And
that's
and again, we're speaking from an idealistic point of view.
right.
This is ideally if like if your goal is to be marketable and you have a job right now and you're working in that way and it is very successful for you and you don't give a shit about the rest of this stuff, it's totally fine.
Hmm.
For me as a freelancer, and this is my own just point of view, the only way I can stand out is by doing different stuff. And that's what helps me actually like get new jobs or grow in some way just for clients. Like
Right.
I'll switch a style completely when I feel like everybody's doing something realistically. I'll go the opposite way with it, and then that'll help me stand out amongst everybody else who's doing the realism.
Right.
That's not to say what I'm doing is better. It's just a way to be seen more by clients and a way to hopefully appeal to something that nobody's really trying to appeal to right now.
Right. So there's only a couple things left on our list of stuff we wanted to cover for this. The next one I think is a pretty big one. We mentioned in the beginning that the model used to be the forum model with the sketchbooks and everybody followed it, and that was kind of the thing everybody did. That was the base that everybody started on. Now, if you're coming into the industry, the model isn't on those forums anymore. Now it's pretty much entirely on social media, Facebook, stuff like that. And the next thing we're going to talk about is the mindset people get into of kind of having like bait, where you just want to get images out there as fast as possible so you get seen as much as possible. More people like them, more people comment on them. So many things come and go on Facebook so rapidly because of how it's designed that people are more concerned with maintaining a level of visibility than they are with the quality of the content,
Yeah.
which sounds harsh, but that's how Facebook is designed, and that's what everybody's using instead of forums now to get out there. Even if you're on art websites that are for artists, they don't have the same kind of visibility that the forums had, where people that don't do art are
No.
still coming there and looking at them. Primarily, people are using, Facebook, Tumblr, and that's really it.
Well, I mean, we're talking about the difference in attitude towards presenting yourself.
Yeah,
It's the difference between going to a gym and working out with a bunch of people who are at the same gym. We all know why we're there. We all know what's happening. Facebook is like the show floor when you're showing off your muscles, like you
yeah,
want to
exactly.
look great in front of everybody.
And if
And
you're not
it's
in
less
shape yet,
about that stuff.
yeah. But that's the thing is, it's I understand the necessity for it because of how the website works and how your piece that you put up yesterday is gone in 2 days.
Yeah.
It's out of the mindset unless it was absolutely mind blowing and super original and people are keeping it around. It's gone. It's off the radar super fast. So it's about the next piece and getting it out there and making it look as good as possible. And how do I get something done that fast that looks so good? And all of that stuff kind of compounds into making these choices. We just wanted to address that because it's not necessarily the healthiest way to grow as an artist. But it is a problem. It's how do you get around that when that's the current thing everybody has to be on?
Yeah. It is a weird place to be, to not have like yourself be established. And like even for me right now, like I do well on Facebook, like pretty good. But even then, like it's so different. Like the
Hmm.
reaction to a piece, like there used to be a time where I would put things on a forum or wherever that was more like art oriented, and I would have the helpful side of things that were more constructive, and I would have people who were just would just be like outright like I don't like that.
Right.
And then I would have people who would just be complimenting me and whatever. And there actually used to be a thing on those sites where they would say like, I don't want any ass pats.
Right.
And you would say that because you're like, I only want people who are gonna help me.
Right. Constructive criticism.
Yeah. But on the Facebook thing, it's like I'm only existing on this platform for promotion.
I feel like there's only three responses on Facebook ever. I'm probably wrong about this, but it's either, wow, amazing work, great job, you're so amazing. Number two is a meme of either being amazed or a snarky comment. And number three is just the post that has nothing to do with the piece at all, where they use it to promote something else that has nothing to do with it. And that's all I ever see on Facebook. It's either like, wow, you're amazing, great stuff, even if you yourself know that it's not your best. Number two is, SpongeBob with his eyes popping out saying wow or something like that at the piece. And number three is like, pretty good, but I'm so tired of seeing girls wearing boob armor. I can't believe, and then like 8 paragraphs. So that's not, it's not the best learning environment.
Yeah.
It's just something to be aware. If that's the only place you're getting your feedback and you're new to the industry, just keep that in mind. It's not the best way to grow.
Yeah, the number one thing I think to kind of get past that is to have your own like ring of people that you really trust, who are all willing to help each other. Like I think back to like I'll use this example forever, like the Brandywine School. When you look at like all the artists that come from there, like it's like you say, how do they all go there? How did they all happen to be there at the same time? They didn't happen to be anywhere, and they didn't happen to be like the best of the best. They became really good because they were around each other and they helped each other and they grew together.
Right.
And that's what is a lot healthier in my opinion than using something like Facebook for serious feedback and things. Like surround yourself by people who have your best intentions in mind, and by that I mean people who are willing to tell you the truth.
Right.
And are going to be honest and straightforward with you.
And 9 times out of 10, the best people to get feedback from is not the audience. It's from peers that are around the same place you're at or above where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you want to surround yourself by people that are better than you so that you can grow.
Right.
And, like, you want that kind of feedback. And, yeah, I don't think Facebook is ideal for that. And it becomes, like Dan was saying, a weird place where you get into the mindset of creating stuff as quick as possible for feedback and to remain relevant.
Right.
And there's so many examples where that, doesn't help. Or at least it doesn't help as much as, like, for instance, Brad Rigney coming out of the woodwork and having this portfolio all set up where nobody had seen his work before. And you just go, wow. This is out of nowhere, and he becomes this huge guy overnight.
Right.
He gets work on all the major games and whatever else. There's no concrete way to do it, and Facebook isn't right or wrong. But what it does that is negative, I think, is what we were saying, that it creates that impulse for the likes, for the feedback that's positive, and then you become addicted to it. You start to believe it.
I did it for the likes.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And I mean, just in the interest of honesty and transparency, like, we're going to both offer an example of one that's happened. Like, it's happened to us numerous times.
Yeah,
There's multiple times we've both done it. Everybody does it. But just so we're not like, we don't want to sound like hypocrites or anything, because we're guilty of all this stuff. That's why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, just last week, somebody sent me a message from the community who I hadn't talked to in a while, and they said, "Hey man, so are you still like painting? What happened?" And I'm like, I've done nothing but work for like months. Like, that's all I do, is doing tons of miniature work, but I don't show any of it because I can't. And the comment they asked me got under my skin, and I was like, oh God, well, I have some personal paintings that are pretty close to done that I might as well just crop and show, just to show people that I'm doing something. And it just bothered me, and I put up a piece. And then afterwards I was looking at it and I was like, that is so pathetic.
Right.
That one person's comment about like, so yeah, you kind of fell off recently, when in fact I'm working way more than I ever used to. to let that get to me as much as it did, to the point where I put up something that isn't even done yet, just so people can go, "Oh, it's Dan Warren, like and share." Like that's so sad. So
No.
sad.
And for me, it's like I am in some kind of weird work pit.
You're posting work from like 3 years ago that you never showed, like the Woodman.
Yeah, well, in all honesty, I was never gonna finish that Mega Man series, so I just wanted to put it out finally. I figured somebody would appreciate it. But
Uh,
but more when I do that is when like I'll be working like I'm working two jobs right now, like big contract jobs, and then I'm working on Starvale and also doing like the Steve Lichman once in a while and Marvel stuff. But like all of those things are happening, but then I just go like sitting there and I'm like, people haven't seen me in a while. So like I should just draw something, right? So I'll draw like the Punisher, or I'll draw like
Andrew Jackson.
yeah, just something off the top of my head to be like, this. Hopefully, I'll have fun with this, and if not, at least it's like something that keeps me alive in the world out
Right.
there.
Right.
And I'll put it online, and that's like more. That's almost more of like a promotional thing where it's like I don't even know what I'm doing. Like,
Right.
why am I even doing this work? I'm just trying to remain like a. I'm so much in that like freelance mode where it's like just put everything out all the time.
It's
You
so
have to
sad.
be out there constantly, or
Yeah,
else somehow work is going to dry up and everybody's going to forget about you.
I know.
And it's
As
like,
as you're actively working for clients, putting work out there,
right.
you're concerned that you won't be working for clients and putting work out there. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's like I'm working on like five different jobs
And you're like, you know
and
what?
doing that.
I'm not visible enough. Like
Yeah.
as you're doing more work than ever. It's oh my God, it's the worst. The Facebook model is the most neurotic thing.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was talking about that the other day about how crazy like that mindset is of like, wow, it's so desperate.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And it ties into the stuff we're all talking about because you can make an image that looks pretty done pretty quick. Even if you don't really know what you're doing, you can get it to a certain level where it's shareable. And people are going to go, oh, great, amazing. And then it's gone in a day. And you're like, oh, I got to do it again. They're not going to remember my name if it's one image. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's bad. It all dovetails into each other.
I mean, even this is the same thing. Like,
Yeah, pretty
why?
much.
Who gives a shit what we have to say?
I know we're doing a talk
Why
so
are
you
we
can.
compelled to have you guys listen to us?
I
It's
don't
because we're
know.
freaking narcissists.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anyway,
We saw this issue and we said, you know what? We're the ones to make everybody agree about this. We can heal these wounds.
I know, right?
We are the Abraham Lincolns of concept. No, it's just the worst, worst mentality.
Yep.
No, but yeah, I mean, the last thing we're going to talk about, the last thing on the list is just for anybody who does this, who's any kind of professional. If you're getting any kind of work that's paying you, you're some degree of professional. That's just how it is. If you are getting work and people of any skill level are looking up to you for either advice or how to get into this, you have a responsibility to those beginners, and you have a responsibility to be honest about the pros and cons of any method you might be using. We're talking about photo painting right now, so that's the one we're going to talk about. But people, always, if you're getting any kind of work, there's people that aren't working that want to be there. They look up to you. They want to get advice. They want to know what to do, how to get where you're at, how to start doing this. And we all have a responsibility to them to be honest about it, to tell them what's going to work, what's not going to work, what they should be doing now as opposed to maybe waiting till later to do. And that's something everybody has to kind of figure out.
Yeah, and where you started. Because a
Yeah,
lot of us didn't start there. We ended up doing it because we had to, but
right.
we started from a place of like actually studying and learning just the basics. And then just because you do it now, like, and I feel, at least from my point of view, whenever I am like, I get passionate about the thing, it's because I
Hmm.
care about how, like, it bothers me when I think about when I started doing this. And if somebody had told me that that was the way to get better, and it wasn't, and it like actually like ended up slowing me down,
Hmm.
like that bothers me because just to get results quick,
Right.
You know, that's not the right mindset to be in the beginning. The impatient, like, you should be slowing down. You should be investing yourself in getting patient and sitting there and saying, like, this is going to take years,
Hmm.
but I'm going to be that much better for it when I get there.
And that's the thing, is that, just to go back to the thing we keep hitting home about, it's the model has changed, whereas the forums used to be the thing and everybody was communicating and you could see what people did over the course of years in their sketchbooks and it was a big discussion. That's not really around anymore. And the new thing is that people see stuff by professionals, they don't talk to the professional, and then they just emulate. And that's the model for learning now. It's, I saw this and I emulated it. And if they're beginners and they really don't know what they're doing or how they're getting into the industry or anything like that, and it's their first set of images, if they see people using these techniques that are semi-advanced that you kind of have to have a grasp on painting to know how to do, and they start emulating them right from the get-go, they're going to misunderstand a lot of stuff. They're going to not know what they're doing. It might end up harming them in the end in terms of their progression. And that's the thing, is just, if you see people emulating your stuff, if you see people that are trying to learn from the techniques you're using, take the time to talk to them, take the time to critique their work, take the time to say, this is a good thing you're doing, you're going to learn a lot from it. Maybe don't do this thing because, you're not there yet. You will be. But, take the time to do that, because the discussion is the biggest element of the community that we've lost.
Yeah. And again, we're wrong. We're wrong all the time.
We're wrong all the time. Hopefully
So,
if this resonated with anybody who heard it and it sounded pretty good or you agreed with it, that's great. If you think we're totally wrong about absolutely everything, we probably are. Anyways, we tried.
yeah, at least we started to talk about it or something.
Now we don't have to comment on anything about this anymore because we can just link this video.
Yeah.
Saved us a lot of time.
Well, I don't know. Thanks for listening to you guys who are super desperate to be heard. I think that's what we've realized over the course of this, is that we're the photo manipulators of just like being human beings.
Yeah, exactly. This is our quick paste to make it like our lives are complete. Enjoy.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.